So hey guys, a couple things to talk about, so stay tuned today. Number one is going to be my immediate problems I'm having with the engine build that I've got, which would be the coolant leaking out of the head bolts again. Number two would be reaching 1,000 subscribers and the forum post and being smart. And number three would be some other changes I'm going to make when I build the engine back up this time around. Well, I pulled the motor again. This is going to be the second time I've pulled this specific motor because of the same problem, which is the head bolts not sealing up. And what I mean by that is the ARP head studs that I bought. They all protrude into water jackets on the block, and they do not seal up with the ARP recommended thread sealant. So what ends up happening is out the side of the cylinder head, the coolant will wick up the bolt. Actually, not even wick, it's pressurized, so it'll crawl up the bolt and out the side of the cylinder head, and I'll constantly get coolant drips. I tried sealing it up when I put it in, and I put a little bit of thread sealant. I'll show you a picture here on it. Don't do that. I took it apart and putting a bunch more thread sealant on because I thought I didn't get enough the first time. And guess what? It didn't seal up. So that ARP thread sealant picture here is junk. Don't get it. I gave him a call, and he said that on the GM blocks, these threads, which you should really clean out with thread chaser, and you can spray it with brake cleaner and maybe like a brush out with a nylon brush. He said these threads are out of tolerance or something like that. Well, either all of GM's engines are out of tolerance threads or the ARP head studs are bad. I don't know. ARP was pretty nice to work with, I'll be honest. They were great on the phone. But I had a friend come over who was a mechanic for 5 years, and he wiggled these, and he said, hey, look at that. These are super loose in there. So something's loose, and that crappy Teflon paste just runs right out and doesn't seal jack. So if you want to seal these guys, instead I've been reading a lot about how to do this, and some folks, a lot of people do Permatex Ultra Black gasket maker, maximum oil resistance. This does not harden, and it seals good. The only problem with this sometimes is you got to be careful with it. It could, when you put it in the block, it could bead up, and you could get beads of silicone going through your coolant system, and that could clog up some stuff. An additional thing that I've seen some people do, and some people do both the sealant and this, is Teflon tape. Although I don't think I'm going to do this, and I don't like this idea, and I don't recommend it. Mostly because Teflon pipe tape was, I've been reading a little bit about it, and I believe that it's made for NPT threads, which this is not. These are not NPT threaded, not whatsoever. They're 7/16. It's not a pipe thread. And I don't think they actually have any sealing properties themselves. The tape does not, at least. I believe the tape is actually more or less like a lubrication sort of thing, so that on a tapered thread or something like that, you can tighten it a lot harder, and the tightening of that thread itself is what seals. But the Teflon tape just allows you to tighten it harder. So that might be true or not. I'm obviously not a pipe fitter myself, but yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to be careful with this Permatex Ultra, and I think I'm gonna smear it in the hole and on the threads and tighten it down. I'm putting it in the hole just so that it doesn't all bead up at the top, and then wipe it off real good and clean it off real good with some kind of a solvent that'll dissolve it off of the head. I think that's all I'm going to do. That's what a lot of folks do, and a lot of stores will recommend you to do to keep your coolant out of there. So take it from me, I mean, learn from my mistakes. I'm tired of pulling this thing out, and this is literally the third time I'm sealing these things. Thing is, I saw this coming, sort of, you know, hindsight's 20/20, but ZZP on their website says do not use a liquid sealant on it, but Intense Racing doesn't say anything about it, about liquid. They didn't say why though, and I am so sick of websites like that not saying why, because you don't really know what you're doing if they're not going to tell you, and then you have to figure out the hard way, like me, why you shouldn't use a liquid Teflon. Clearly the liquid compound that ARP sells is not meant to fill in a crack that big. You see guys on all the kinds of different platforms complaining about ARP bolts for the same reason, so your guess is as good as mine. So I recently got 1,000 subscribers. Thank you guys. I am super excited about that. That's really nice to have. Looking forward to more too. So kind of in conjunction with getting 1,000 subscribers, I totally revamped my build thread, which I've now made it into a absolute step-by-step guide of exactly how to do it and what to do to get a 3800 motor into your Fiero. Keep in mind, all my videos are designed to go hand in hand with my build thread or my forum post. It is in the description of every video that I make. Please use that extensively. Every single part and method and procedure and assembly and everything is in there. I give you two options. There's a big table of contents at first. First, it goes into how to pick out your parts and get familiar with a 3800 engine and then common modifications. Then it moves on to build one, which was the first engine that I did, which is actually still sitting back there on a tire, which was a direct swap in, and it was very easy to do with the 4T65 transmission. Then build two, which is this engine right here, okay, my new engine. Build two is an all-out supercharged M90 build with the 4T65 transmission. Then I supply all assembly diagrams and torque specifications and torque sequences that you need to tear apart the engine and put it back together with. Then there is the section on the wiring harness. You can buy one or you can build one, and I show you how to build one, not exactly how. I don't have the dimensions of a loom laid out. You can still figure it out and do your own. I would recommend buying one, having done both in the past. And then there is a whole step-by-step section of all the videos that I recorded of tearing down the engine and putting it back together, followed by a short section of videos specific to build number two, so you can see how to do each one on your own. And then at the end of the assembly video section is how to actually pour your heads and get real down to the nitty-gritty stuff on a 3800, and how to check the bottom end, meaning your bearings and your crankshaft and everything. Then it gets into other helpful parts to put on your Fiero while you're doing the engine. Most of them are a lot easier to do with the engine out, so you should do them while you're at it. The build thread is a compilation of all 3800 knowledge that I've accumulated in the last 2 to 3 years, mostly from either Fiero forums or parts websites like ZZP or Intense or something. And it's a rolling document, really. And if you guys have suggestions or want to point out something to me that should really be included in there, please do, by all means. It is for the purpose of the community, and we can all make it better and do it what we need it to. I hope that comes in handy for you guys, but I need you guys to be careful with it, though. Let me explain. For some reason, on ZZP's website, their description for how to set the valve lash is just really wacky. I think it's for an adjustable rocker sort of setup, which aren't even on the 3800 engine anyways. I tried to follow that, and I reverse calculated the thread pitches to figure out the distance of the turns that they're talking about, because they said I bought LS7 lifters, they said on my LS7 lifters you need, like, I think it was between 3/8 and 3/4 of a turn or something like that. Well, I reverse calculated that and figured out that I needed about, it was like 0.050 or 0.056 inches on average, I think, of preload on the LS7 lifters. Well, ZZP's numbers are totally bogus, if you ask me, because if you actually look up what the preload requirement on an LS7 lifter is, it should be about 0.1 inches or 100 thousandths, not 50 thousandths or not 56 thousandths or whatever. I reverse calculated from ZZP's website. So, guys, if you're ordering parts, please learn from me. And I know that I have my awesome build thread that a lot of you guys have used, but you need to know what parts you're putting in your engine. And you need to know, like, how they work and how they go together and why. And you need to do the research, because even somebody like me who does all of the research, I cannot know everything. Like there's stuff that I'm gonna miss. Well, I've done 98% of this stuff for you guys, but there's still stuff that you're gonna miss too, and you're not gonna know why I chose the part that I chose too in the same way. So I'll do my best to explain why I go with things and why I do things, but when ZZP tells you stuff like that and I just throw it together and it seems like it works, then great. But like sometimes they could be wrong, and or other times they might not tell you and you might not understand why they went with something, and then you might do something else because it doesn't seem that important to you. But I'm telling you now, you have to do your research. Ask other guys that have done stuff. And honestly, not to step all over my own supporters or community, but forums are not a reliable place of information. They're just not. Forums are, I mean, sometimes they're the only source of information, but they're just not reliable. Any car information that you get, I am sick of forums. I'm sick of trusting forums, and I might be a bit of a hypocrite here because I'm pushing a forum post of my own ideas and stuff and experience. But guys, I'm telling you, don't even trust me, okay? Go and do the research and find the information yourselves. I'm just saying that because I really don't want to cost you guys hundreds of dollars worth of silly mistakes. I am a guy who likes to just bolt stuff together and see it work. That doesn't always work if you don't know what you're doing. It's not worth not knowing what you're doing, and the information is out there, and you can put the effort in if you're going to get this far and spend some money on it. Or have a mechanic do it for you that already knows everything. I do say sometimes that the world runs on hillbilly engineering, and that honestly is pretty true, and the aftermarket companies, I think, do a decent job at designing parts that are appropriate and do work for these engines that are just a slap-on, bolt-on thing. But you just remember, anytime you modify a stock engine, you're likely taking reliability and longevity of that engine away. You're putting parts that were not originally designed on this engine by the original designers, and honestly, all that information is gone. You won't be able to phone somebody that works at GM and ask them about a 3800 and why it was designed the way it is anymore. And that's the way it is with any discontinued product, really. But I think an accumulation of several decades worth of experience with these engines has produced a good idea at best, really, of what stuff works on here and what stuff doesn't. So I ended up with possibly close to 50 thousandths short push rods, which could contribute to some valve noise, or it could actually lose some considerable amount of power and maybe even destroy the valves train if it went long enough or hard enough. I didn't experience any issues with what I did, but it's going to make me a lot more comfortable to know that it's measured right and it's exactly the right clearance within that little range, because hydraulic roller lifters, they automatically adjust your lash a little bit for you, so it took some of that play out for me, but I don't want to rely on that. I want to know that it's solid. So I'm going to remeasure them and probably get close to 50 thousandths longer push rods. We'll see. I'm remeasuring the push rods, and I got a slightly different head gasket, a 4-layer instead of a 5-layer MLS gasket. Talked to Intense a little bit. Since I'm not really running crazy compression or boost, I'm just going to stick with about a stock height gasket, and I went a little thicker before because that's what I thought I measured the out of hole clearance by, but I don't think I need that, so I'm going to lower it back down, back to stock, and hopefully get a little bit of my compression back. but that's going to require me to remeasure my push rods. If you talk to Cometic, which is where I bought my MLS gasket from, they have a Viton seal. It's like a rubber coating seal on their head gaskets, and they say that when you bolt down your steel head gasket and run the engine and heat cycle it, essentially, that it becomes bad. It wears out, I don't know exactly, but obviously they make the gasket, so they're going to recommend that I buy a new one. But I have bolted them together a few times and they seem okay, but I decided to just get new ones this time. Now if you bolt it on and you don't run the engine and heat cycle it, then I think they're okay to reuse, but the company itself, I know that the idea is that MLS or steel gaskets are okay to reuse, but the company that makes them themselves say that they're not. But at the same time, I'm taking that opportunity to change the head gasket type as well, so I might as well. Some guys spray their head gaskets in copper. These Cometics, the manufacturer strictly recommends you don't do that specifically for theirs because they have a rubber coating on them already. There's no need to do the copper seal unless you clean that off somehow. ZZP, I think, even does that, and they've never had a problem. Well, okay, so be it. That's great for them. They have experience with it, sure, but I'm gonna go with what the manufacturer says, and I wanted to change it anyways. Other than that, I'll tell you one other thing that I found while tearing into this engine is I decided to pull the lifters, and I would appreciate some advice or expertise on this, but I found 5 of my lifters I could not blow through, and I could not blow through the oil passage, so I'm assuming that it's clogged up and dirty. I know you can clean them, but I just decided to order some new ones because they're not that expensive, and I don't want to, I'd just rather start new or something. They are hydraulic roller lifters, and I've been reading about that, and yeah, you're not supposed to really change lifters and cams and all that without, or you're not supposed to change one without the other, but since they're rollers, I don't think it really matters. So I'm going to throw new lifters at it just because I want them to be oiled enough. And I obviously put in the zinc to break it in. Modern oils don't have zinc additives in them anymore. What zinc will do is actually help with the break-in process, and I guess it embeds itself in pits or in microscopic pits in the steel and walls and cylinder walls and stuff. And actually helps. It's a softer metal, so it helps to lubricate, or not lubricate, but it does not damage or scratch the engine internals. So I might just put that in for the rest of the engine's life. This is the experiment I did with cleaning the lifters at first, and I always want to mark them for the right orientation and stuff. I wore the marking off on this one accidentally, but gasoline is a serious solvent, and it will dissolve oil and all kinds of stuff. I still can't blow through it, so there might be something else left in there. I did kind of put the engine back together a little dirtier than I should have, I think, so I'm just going to replace these lifters. You can take these apart and clean them out, but I'm not gonna do that because they're cheap enough. I mean, a set of 12 is like $70 or something from Intense Racing, and that way I know that they're not failed parts going back in. So obviously I'm going to soak the new lifters in oil before I put them back in to the engine. I also, while I was at it, decided to do a valve leak check, and what I did was I turned these upside down and got them pretty even seeming, and filled the bowls with transmission fluid, and I probably waited about 2 weeks, see if it would drown out, and to my surprise, which I'm very surprised by this because I had these machined and had a 3-angle valve job put on them. I got out of these two exhaust ports here, this one and this one, I had some transmission fluid starting to leak out. So in the forum post I put a how to lap your valves video, instructional video, and how to take apart your heads and stuff. So I went and got one of these valve lapping tools and a little of the valve lapping compound, which was kind of misleading. It wasn't a traditional compound. There it is, Permatex valve grinding compound. it's a progressive compound that has a really rough grit to it, and then as the more you work it out, the finer the grit gets. So every time that you start lapping the valve, it'll sound really grindy and then it'll get smooth. You got to do that a few times and listen to it by ear. I don't really like that. I might go for a more traditional compound next time so I can really tell how good the valve is getting ground. But I did a couple rounds of lapping each exhaust valve, and I've had these things sitting here for another 2 weeks-ish, and they're not leaking at all now. So thankfully my exhaust valves are sealed up, and hopefully that'll be some cheap power gains. I'm not sure how much because it wasn't a very big leak, but obviously it's going to help me get some power back, because that way the exhaust, all my combustion is not going to be forced out the exhaust. So if you like this video, guys, please like and subscribe and give me a comment. I still respond to every comment that I get, and it's not unmanageable at all, even with 1,000 subscribers now. And hopefully we'll get to that someday once this thing is in again. Oh, also, brake cleaner really kills grass. Don't do that.